Okay, let's unpack this. Think about a game series that's like been beloved for decades. Millions know exactly what to expect. How does a franchise like that suddenly just flip the script, introduce really different mechanics, but still feel like the thing you love?
Yeah, it's a definite high wire act.
Yeah,
You've got to respect the legacy,
for sure.
but also show you're not afraid to evolve, maybe even challenge what players think the game can be.
And that's exactly the kind of evolution we're diving into today. We're focusing on the Pokemon Legends subseries, and we're specifically pulling insights from, well, that stack of materials you shared with us.
Right. Those sources, they cover a couple of key things: reviews and player discussions, mostly from Reddit, about Pokemon Legends Arceus, and then also previews, giving us little glimpses into the upcoming Pokemon Legends, ZA.
So, our mission here to, cut through the noise and really pull out the essential nuggets from these specific materials. What were the genuinely significant gameplay shifts in Arceus? What did that player experience feel like, especially around this whole idea of risk?
And then, what do the ZA previews tell us, based on these sources, about where the Legends series is headed next?
Exactly. Consider this your, concentrated hit of insight on these games, straight from the stuff you provided.
Okay, so let's start by stepping back into the past with Pokemon Legends, Arceus. The sources, they really paint a picture of this ancient Hisui region. It's described as a time when the relationship between humans and Pokemon was, well, tenuous at best, is the phrase
It
used.
also was framed like an isekai adventure, wasn't it? Like you're suddenly dropped into this unfamiliar, maybe even hostile past.
Exactly, and right away, you know this isn't the usual journey. Your main goal isn't collecting gym badges. It's filling the region's first ever Pokédex. The sources really highlight this core research loop: catching, battling, observing.
And then reporting all your findings back to Professor Laventon.
Yeah. And that research, it directly ties into your progression. Your Pokédex rank Captain Silene handles that it's not just some number. The sources really emphasize that it controls what level Pokemon you can actually handle in battle.
Mm.
And it unlocks crucial crafting recipes too. Crafting becomes incredibly important in this game.
Right, right. Because the world itself is almost a character here. It's described as a semi-open world, these big, distinct zones you unlock as the story goes on. The sources talk a lot about the freedom to just explore and see Pokemon behaving naturally out there.
And this freedom, it immediately introduces a huge difference. This is a point the sources, especially the player discussions, spend a lot of time on: player interaction and risk. Unlike, well, any main series game before it, wild Pokemon can and absolutely will attack you, the player character, directly.
Wow. Yeah, that changes everything about just running through tall grass, doesn't it? You can actually black out and drop some of the items you were carrying.
Mm-hmm. The sources compare this maybe to losing money and warping back to a Pokemon Center in the old games. But the feeling of it seems different. Your screen edges actually darken or turn red, giving you this direct visual cue that you are in danger.
Okay, so your actual movement through the world suddenly matters a whole lot more. Like running or jumping makes noise, right? There's that symbol.
Yeah, and that attracts attention. If an aggressive Pokemon spots you, you see this red eye symbol, and bam, they'll charge you.
So stealth isn't just for getting a surprise attack anymore. It's for survival. Crouching, using tall grass. The sources make these sound like essential tools.
Totally. And if they do spot you and attack, you actually get a chance to dodge or roll away. Players were calling them invincibility frames or iframes.
Huh, okay. Like in action games.
Kind of, yeah. You also interact with the environment more directly. You throw your own Pokemon at trees or rocks to gather materials for that crafting system.
Oh, interesting. And the sources mention that can sometimes flesh out hidden Pokemon too.
That's right. And just getting around these big zones needs specific partners. You unlock essential riding Pokemon like Basculegion for water or Braviary for flying through the story.
And they mention the danger, right? Like if you fall in the water without Basculegion, you can actually drown.
Yeah, there's actual peril there. Adds to that risk factor we talked about.
So even the core act of catching Pokemon got a massive shakeup. You're physically aiming and throwing Pokeballs yourself right at the Pokemon in the world.
Yep. Ideally from behind, you get a bonus. Or you can still do the traditional battle first, then catch. But a key detail the sources point out: you cannot catch an aggressive Pokemon that spotted you, the ones with the red eye. You have to either evade them or battle them first.
Okay, that makes sense. And there was that clever tactic mentioned in the player discussions too. Like if you throw a ball, it breaks out and the Pokemon gets mad. You can sometimes throw another ball immediately and just run away to sort of reset its angry state, letting you try again without a fight.
Oh yeah, I saw that mentioned.
Mm.
A neat little trick some players found. battles themselves, while still turn-based, they also saw some pretty meaningful changes. The action order on the side of the screen is super important, showing how speed dictates the turn sequence.
And those new agile and strong styles, they add a whole tactical layer. Costs 2 PP instead of 1, right? But you can go faster with agile or slower but hit harder with strong.
Exactly. And the sources noted how agile style could potentially let you take 2 turns in a row, maybe setting up for a big, strong style finisher.
Interesting. It's also kind of cool that you can move your trainer character around during the battle, even though you don't take damage yourself in that state. Adds a bit of dynamism.
Definitely. Then you've got the alpha Pokémon. These are those huge, red-eyed, high-level guys you find out in the wild.
Right. The sources describe them almost like mini bosses, or sometimes they just appear randomly.
Yeah, and they start with high effort levels. That's the new system the sources explain replaces the traditional IVs and EVs.
Okay, so effort levels, ELs. You raise those with grit items.
Up to 10 for every stat. And you get those grid items from releasing Pokemon you don't need, or from catching or defeating those alphas. It's a much more streamlined training system, really.
And evolution is manual now. You choose when they evolve. And managing moves is different too.
Yeah, you manually trigger evolution. And for moves, Pokemon learn a pool of moves, and you can swap them in and out from that pool at camps or pastures, not just stick with 4. More flexibility.
Gotcha. And the economy seems really tied into that crafting loop we mentioned earlier. Crafting items is essential because apparently money can be pretty scarce.
It can be, yeah. You get a crafting kit so you can make stuff anywhere, which is handy. Inventory space is limited, though, but you can pay to expand it, and it gets pricier each time.
And there's even farming for things like mints to change Pokemon natures.
Yep, a little farm plot you can cultivate for specific items. Helps with optimization.
The game also throws in these dynamic events, right? Like mass outbreaks. The sources said those are great for shiny hunters.
Definitely. Lots of one species appearing at once. And then there are the space-time distortions. These big dome areas pop up with rare, strong Pokemon and valuable items inside. Adds some unpredictability to exploring.
So with all these changes, the direct interaction, the danger, the exploration focus, it's really no surprise the sources were buzzing about that one specific debate. The whole risk versus reward thing.
Yeah, this seems to be where players really, grappled with the new mechanics. One side of the debate, and this was pretty heavily represented in the player discussions we looked at, argued that PLA felt more engaging precisely because it constantly forced you to weigh the risk.
Right, the risk of getting attacked yourself or using up precious resources or picking the right team for a tough area.
Exactly. Weighing that against the reward of catching that Pokemon, making Pokedex progress, or getting materials efficiently.
And the people who felt that way, they said it made the wild Pokemon feel like actual threats again. Like wild animals giving the game a more, mature or challenging vibe compared to recent main series games.
But the sources also definitely contained counter-arguments. Some players felt the actual consequences maybe weren't that significant or all that different from past games in practice. Well, they pointed out that quick travel back to base kind of mitigated the risk of losing items if you blacked out far away. And they felt resources and crafting materials were actually pretty abundant, maybe like finding Pokeballs scattered everywhere in older games.
Okay. And losing items when you black out was just seen as, like, a different flavor of losing money and warping back to a Pokemon Center.
Pretty much. Some argued it wasn't fundamentally a harsher penalty, and they also pointed out that older games also forced team changes, for HMs or trade evolutions or completing the decks so that strategic team building wasn't entirely new either.
So for some, the fun was more just in the novelty of the catching mechanic itself, not necessarily because they felt dramatically more at risk.
Exactly. It seems for some, the core enjoyment came from that active throwing and stealth, rather than a perceived increase in difficulty or consequences.
What's really fascinating there is how the exact same mechanics could lead to such different perceptions among players. Like, does being directly targeted by a Pokemon, even if the penalty is similar to older games, just fundamentally change how you feel about exploring that world?
Yeah, the sources show there really wasn't one single answer to that. It highlights how sensitive players are to any changes in that core gameplay loop.
Definitely. Okay, so if Arceus was experimenting with player interaction outside of battle, what do the ZA sources hint is coming next? Where's the innovation heading?
Well, looking at the previews for Pokemon Legends, ZA, it really seems like they're taking that same willingness to shake things up, but this time they're bringing it right into the core battle system.
Okay.
The game's set in Lumio City during a big redevelopment project, apparently. Hotel Z is your base of operations.
And even though it's a city, the sources mentioned wild zones within it, so you can still encounter and catch Pokemon in the environment.
Yeah, that aspect seems to be carrying over and integrating the wild Pokemon experience into the urban setting somehow.
But the really big news, the headline from the ZA sources, was about the battle system itself, right?
Oh yeah, get this. They state that trainers and their Pokemon will move around in real time during battles.
Wait, real-time movement. In a Pokemon battle? That sounds like a huge departure from the turn-based system that's defined Pokemon for, like, ever.
Absolutely. The sources are describing this as a first battle system of its kind
Hmm.
for the whole series. They're hinting at mechanics like needing precise timing for swapping Pokemon and moves having different lengths and like impact areas on the field.
Wow.
The expectation based on this is that combat's going to become a lot more of a strategic affair,
Hmm?
focusing maybe on positioning and timing just as much as move choice.
Okay, that sounds like they're really building on PLA's experimentation with player agency, but bringing it right into the heat of battle, that's potentially massive. And the title, ZA, that has a specific meaning too, according to the sources.
It does. The previews confirmed it refers to a new ranking system tied to competitive battle zones within the game. Trainers apparently start at rank Z and aim to climb all the way up to A.
A competitive ranking system built in. Interesting. And who are we starting our Limios city adventure with? The sources listed a pretty eclectic mix of starters from different generations.
That's right. The starters are Chikorita, the grass type from Gen 2, Totodile, the water type also from Gen 2, and Tepig, the fire type from Gen 5.
Chikorita, Totodile, and Tepig. Okay, quite a spread. And the sources confirm their full evolution lines will be there too.
Yep, and a specific legendary Pokemon is confirmed as well.
Zygarde. The sources confirmed Zygarde for ZA, reminding us it's that Dragon Ground type from Gen 6 made up of all those cells and cores that let it change forms.
Right, the cores are like the brains, the cells make up the body. The sources mentioned it has a special interest in the player, and it's expected to be pretty central to the story. Maybe tied to this company behind the city's redevelopment, Quasartico Inc.
Could be. And maybe the most exciting bit for fans of X and Y, the Kalos region. The sources confirm Mega Evolution is back.
Yes, big news there. Mega Evolution returns. The sources describe it just like we remember. That temporary boost in power and appearance change, fueled by the bond between trainer and Pokemon, activated by the trainer's keystone and the Pokemon-specific Megastone.
And they listed some confirmed Megas returning.
Classics like Mega Charizard X and Y, Mega Kangaskhan, Gardevoir, Lucario, and Pharaoh's Sableye, Altaria, Absol. A good starting list.
That's already a solid lineup, but the previews hinted there might be new ones too.
Yeah, this was intriguing. The sources specifically mentioned the potential for 27 new Mega Evolutions. If that pans out, combined with the existing 48, that would bring the total up to 75 Mega Evolutions.
75. Wow, that would be a huge expansion of that mechanic. Really leaning into the Kalos theme.
Definitely seems like it. Oh, and just a small detail from the sources, but they mentioned a pre-order bonus plushie of one of the starters being available from the Pokemon Center site.
Always got to have the merch tie-in. Okay, so pulling back from the specifics of Arceus and ZA for a second, what's the bigger picture here? What do these sources, taken together, reveal about the Pokemon Legends series as a whole and why it matters?
Well, first, it's clear Pokemon Legends. Arceus was a really bold step. The sources show it was largely well received, right? Especially for that creative loop of exploration, research, catching.
Yeah, even with some criticisms, like the graphics looking a bit dated compared to maybe Sword and Shield, or the lack of things like multiplayer battles or breeding.
Right. But the real insight I think that you get from looking at both games through these sources is this. The Legends series isn't just a normal spin-off that adds a few features. It feels more like an experimental branch of the franchise, one that's dedicated to fundamentally changing how you interact with the Pokemon world itself.
So PLA focused on that interaction in the environment, the stealth, the dodging, aiming the balls, actually getting attacked by Pokemon.
Exactly. And ZA, based on what little we know from these previews, seems to be taking that same spirit of direct interaction and applying it right to the core battle system with these real-time elements.
So why does this matter to you, the listener? Well, because these games seem to represent a really different kind of Pokemon fantasy. It's maybe less about that predictable path to becoming the league champion and more about experiencing the Pokemon world dynamic, sometimes dangerous, much more firsthand.
Yeah, the sources suggest this series is exploring a path that really prioritizes immersion, direct player agency, maybe more strategic moment-to-moment gameplay, alongside all the familiar stuff like catching and battling.
So we've taken the sources you provided and done a real deep dive into the very distinct world of PLA and looked at the exciting, potentially game-changing directions hinted at for PLZA.
This Legends series really seems committed to experimenting with the core pillars of Pokémon, balancing beloved returning features like Mega Evolution with pretty radical shifts like real-time battle movement.
What does this willingness to push the boundaries mean for the future of Pokemon, maybe even beyond just these Legends titles? Will this focus on risk, on direct interaction, on dynamic strategy?
Yeah.
Will that become more central to the whole franchise going forward?
It's a big question. And as you think about all these changes we've discussed based on the sources,
Mm.
what aspect of this evolution stands out the most to you? What are you most curious or maybe even concerned about?